everyone. I'm Dr. Josephine Yusun Sunga. We hope you're in great spirits wherever you are as you join us today on day one of the Nestle Nutrition Institute 97th Global Workshop. Have you ever wondered how much history and science there is in a vitamin tablet, a pinch of iodized salt, or a glass of milk? The field of nutrition research has grown immensely and forms the basis of which future generations of adults are shaped. After all, what we feed our children today will determine their growth, lifestyle, and health outcomes at a later age. Today, we will discover how nutrition science has evolved and how it was shaped by the times and events that happened in the communities and around the world. We've gathered some of the brilliant minds in order to bring you a unique program that seeks to understand the past so we can better plan for the future. At the end of this program, we hope you are inspired to ask more questions, seek more answers, as we immerse ourselves in new perspectives that can redefine our practice and the lives of those we care for. It is my honor to present to you Intersections of Nutrition, Retracing Yesterday, Redefining Tomorrow.
How has nutrition science changed throughout the course of history? In what ways have all the breakthroughs and innovations in the field shaped the course of the future? With all the research and data, all the inventions and milestones that have unfolded in the last century, we've been witness to the sheer power of nutrition, and likewise have felt its influence in our lives, whether we know it consciously or not. Let's dig deeper and learn more than what meets the eye, and see just how extensive nutrition science is and the ways it made an impact on various aspects of society, from the individual, the community, and the environment. To how it continues to shift the road forward into the future. This is Intersections of Nutrition. Retracing yesterday, redefining tomorrow.
Life, as we know it today, is rooted in vast research. We are surrounded by an abundance of technology, which we now enjoy. But did you know that the history of pediatric nutrition is immense and fascinating? With the goal of providing only the best for children, science is still moving fast ahead in leaps and bounds in order to achieve this. Today, we will share with you the past, the present, and the future of nutrition science, and how this can impact the child and generations to come. And as renowned scientist Dr. Carl Sagan said, you have to know the past to understand the present. My name is Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is Intersections of Nutrition, Retracing Yesterday, Redefining Tomorrow, the Day 1 program of Nestle Nutrition Institute's 97th Global Workshop. The period from 1920 to 2020 is considered the age of modern nutrition science. And while barely 100 years has passed since the first vitamin was isolated in 1926, many milestones have been uncovered along the way. In today's program, we'll highlight certain breakthroughs that are most critical and pivotal through their intersections and aspects in our world. From the child as an individual and their lives as an integral member of the community, and finally, as an important part of the environment. Let's get started from 1920 to 1940 with the rise of the Industrial Revolution.
Good day, everyone. I'm Dr. Josie Rugacion, a retired professor of pediatrics and currently a practicing pediatric gastroenterologist in the Philippines. Prior to the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, breastfeeding was the only choice of feeding young infants. And if this was not possible, wet nurses were hired to personally nourish the infant, as it was a prevailing belief then that failure to breastfeed the infant will result to death. Truth to be told, breast milk withstood the test of time and remains to be the gold standard of childhood nutrition, the main source of nutrition. Nature has designed the most amazing source of nourishment for our young ones, the act of which not only nurtures them physically in all the aspects of their biology, but also emotionally, psychologically, and socially as well. However, with the rise of the Industrial Revolution, more and more mothers became engaged in labor, and working led to more challenges in sustaining feeding of young children. With each change or option, the more it became evident what was in breast milk that made it the ideal food for children. This began the start of elucidating breast milk composition, the need to understand what breast milk truly is.
As we know it today, breast milk is a cornucopia of nutritive and bioactive components that we've only really just begun understanding. But its bounty and significance has inspired scholars, artists, researchers, poets, doctors, and scientists for centuries. Swiftly, the decades rolled by, and the need for more understanding of breast milk and its substitutes became more apparent. With this, pediatric nutrition took significant turns in order to ensure the best possible outcomes in caring for each individual child.
Indeed, breast milk is very complex. It not only it contains bioactives and nutrients, and it is actually because of the result of evolution of millions of years. More than 110 million years ago, synapsids laid eggs that were prone to dryness, and therefore the synapsids started secreting secretions from their skin to keep the eggs moist. That particular secretion has evolved with mammals over 300 plus million years, which we call now breast milk or mother's milk, which imparts protection as well as nutrition. With millions of years of evolution, actually the milk has evolved into a complex of carbohydrate, proteins, lipids, minerals. And what you may be seeing on the screen now is just a snapshot of what is in mother's milk. Mother's milk is complex. It actually provides nutrients as well as bioactives, nutrients such as water, energy, carbohydrates, micronutrients such as vitamins and minerals, but also bioactives. Now, what are bioactives? Bioactives are those that can affect biological processes, have an impact on the body function or condition, and ultimately health. Some of the examples of the bioactive nutrients in mother's milk are immunoglobulins, cytokines, growth factors, hormones, bioactive proteins and peptides such as lactoferrin, long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids such as DHA, but also glycans like human milk oligosaccharides and gangliosides, and cells like macrophages and stem cells. We know there are a lot of benefits of breastfeeding, not only to the mother, but also to the baby. And there are benefits in short and long term. Benefits to baby may include protection against infection, dental caries, and malocclusion. It may also lead to increase in the intelligence and reduction in overweight and obesity and diabetes later in life. Mothers may be protected against breast cancer, increased birth spacing, and also probable reduction in ovarian cancer and type 2 diabetes. If we talk about bioactives, one of the examples is DHA. DHA is one of the long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids that has been well known for quite some time. We know it is essential for development and overall health of the newborn baby, especially eyes and brain. It is important for visual acuity, retinal development, also important for measures of language and cognition. also for mental and motor health development, and it also leads to healthy immune response to allergens. If we talk about lactoferrin, lactoferrin seems to be a Swiss Army knife of a bioactive nutrient in milk. It can modulate immunity, develop gut, can be antimicrobial, and also can be carrier for other nutrients like iron. Immunoglobulins have been also studied for quite a while. We know that immunoglobulins in mother's milk, such as immunoglobulin A or secretory IgA, along with lactoferrin, can decrease in enterobacteria, which are the bad bugs, and HMOs actually increases the bifidobacteria, which are the good bugs. HMOs, a new field of research for human milk, actually has shown us that in last 10 years or so, that HMO gives newborn multiple layers of protection, including protection against pathogenic infections. It promotes development of intestine and gut, helps establish a healthy gut microbiota, and also can stimulate the maturation of immune system. With that, I want to say, in a nutshell, that sapiens milk has co-evolved with mammals over millions of years that result not only into nutrition, but also bioactivity. Exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life is beneficial to both mother and the baby. And mother's milk is not only a source of nutrition that is important for sustenance, growth, and development of the baby, but also of bioactivity that can impact on body function and ultimately health.
Going beyond nourishing the child as an individual, the world noticed big public health issues, the threat of malnutrition and nutrient deficiencies, which are seen as deterrents to national development. The world began to understand the large-scale significance of nutrition in the lives of children and how communities and various stakeholders needed to come together to address the needs of the population.
Hello, my name is Andrew Prentice. I'm Professor of International Nutrition at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and I'm very privileged to live and work in the Gambia in West Africa, where I head a large team at the Medical Research Council's unit in the Gambia, looking at many aspects of maternal and child health. We do some very basic research trying to understand how nutrients drive health, but our ultimate aim, of course, is to devise next generation interventions that will help children to live longer and healthier lives. So at a congress like this, we consider nutrition as a challenge, but in fact, we're at a wonderful time in the history of mankind. We, first of all, have got all the science that has taught us as to why nutrients are important, which nutrients do which functions. And we're also at a time when the food supply has never been better. And of course, this leads to the fact that we have greater longevity in most countries than has ever been. So in terms of the micronutrients and the macronutrients, we know full well that they are critical to development. Why then do we have problems with undernutrition? And the issue is really complex and is different in many different countries. It can be driven by several sort of basic factors. The most important one is poverty of money and the ability to buy the best foods available, and poverty of knowledge in terms of mums understanding how best to feed their children. But if we put those aside, we are aware that there are huge numbers of people around the world, mothers and parents, who are really feeding their kids fantastic diets. Those children are doing very well. Their brains are growing and developing very well. They do well at school. They become productive members of human society, with leading to what we call human capital for the nation. It's under conditions where mums are not aware, not able to buy those products, that problems arise. And these can fall into what we call the triple burden of malnutrition. key in this is the energy, protein, and nutrient density. The nutrient density of foods is really important. What do we mean by the triple burden? Undernutrition on the one side, so this is when children are wasted, stunted, they don't have enough high quality food to grow well. Hidden hunger, which is where the children may be growing well, but they have underlying micronutrient deficiencies. And then at the other extreme, we have overweight and obesity. And I think it's really important to understand that all three domains of this triple burden can be explained by a single factor, which is the poor quality of food. And by quality, I mean nutrient density. I mean the density of the best of nutrients. So a child becomes stunted because the food is too watery. They may be eating a gruel made of rice or millet that just simply doesn't have enough high quality protein or micronutrients in it. Hidden hunger likewise, because although they may have enough food, that food is deficient in minerals or vitamins. And overweight, you might think, well, there's plenty of density there, but the problem there is that there is an excess density of energy, usually driven by fat or by simple sugars, and there is a deficit in the other nutrients. So you've got an imbalance in the quality of the food. And I think it's really important for us to keep this in mind. So the ultimate aim is food quality. And we are living in this wonderful world where our farmers, our food producers, our supermarkets, and even the multinationals who often get so much stick for what they do and too little credit for providing a really wonderful array of foods that humans have never seen before. And then in terms of pediatrics, the problem comes not that these foods are not available in the world, it becomes that they're not available to certain parts of the world who are too poor, or that they're simply, even when they are available and affordable, the mothers don't know to give them that. And they are feeding their kids instead junk foods, as we would put it, super extracted foods such as oils and simple sugars that have far too much energy in relation to the other nutrients. But I think we really should remind ourselves that there's a good side to this. Of course, we worry as public health nutritionists about the bad side, but the good side is that humans have never had it so good in terms of the food available, the growth and development of our beings, and the longevity of our populations.
From here, milestone after milestone was made in the timeline of pediatric nutrition, responding to the call to better understand the crossroads between child health, food and nutrition, and the community. This is how the world responded.
At this time, important movements occurred in the field of nutrition. The need to evaluate children's nutritional status gave birth to the Gomez classification and the use of Road to Health growth chart in developing countries, defining the categories of malnutrition as first, second, and third degree based on expected weight for age. By the 1960s, a Road to Health chart was circulated in developing countries, starting in Africa. This was the standard reference for these countries, endorsed by WHO until 1978. The Road to Health growth chart was then replaced by the United States NCHS growth charts developed from predominantly bottle-fed white infants and adopted by WHO until the growth reference standards were published in 2006. Population-based researches proved to be major milestones in the history of pediatric nutrition, aided by the conduct of national nutrition surveys that led to defining nutrition-related problems in childhood, crafting of dietary guidelines in the 1980s to address chronic diseases, and nutrition policies supporting legislation and food support programs. Going back to the early 1960s, the knowledge on vitamin and mineral deficiencies led to the important perspective of food as a delivery system for nutrients. This in turn resulted in food fortification for iron, iodine, vitamin A, and vitamin B. From here, food fortification became a policy in developing countries. And between the 1950s and 1960s, we saw a decline in malnutrition and micronutrient deficiencies in developed countries.
As society rolled into the 70s up to our recent memories of the 90s, technological advancement began to play an increasingly rich role in how pediatric nutrition evolved. From the foundations of nutrition, growth, and development that made an impact on the individual and intertwined with the community and policy. We began to see more and more breakthroughs change the landscape of how we knew and understood how to care for our children.
Hi, I'm Dr. Egla de los Santos. I'm the Scientific Affairs for Caribbean Region, Nestle Nutrition. The period from 1970s to 1990s saw the start of the clinical trials in pediatric nutrition as a consequence of technological advancement. With this came game-changing discussions that will lead us to the future of pediatric nutrition, including further discussions and landmark studies on how nutrition impacted health in various ways. Highlights of the period includes the landmark study of Dr. David Barker, which predicted the relationship of being born as a low birth weight and cardiovascular diseases later in life. This study ignited several of other endeavors, such as the fetal origin of diseases, the development origins of health or disease or DOHAD, nutritional programming, epigenetics, and the other concept, which is quite important, is the first 1,000 days. Heated debates and worldwide changes ensued with these landmark studies, and the intersection of nutrition and society was highlighted. For example, on the role of diet and cardiovascular diseases, there were a lot of discussions in whether the culprit was the fat or the sugar. In 1977, the dietary goals for the US recommended low fat, low cholesterol diets for all. In the next decades, and by the year of 2000, obesity and lifestyle diseases have already reached the epidemic proportions in developed countries and have become palpable in developing countries, even in children. Another example can be noted in 1990, where the Action on Hunger was established as a goal initiative to eliminate hunger and micronutrient deficiency in low-income countries. This led to a massive nutrient supplementation and fortification. In the 1990s, folic acid supplementation of pregnant mothers and fortification of flours and grains with folic acid were implemented. It's clear that this moment in the history, how truly powerful the role of nutrition has been influencing various aspects of the society.
The last 20 years saw a surge in highly sophisticated innovations and research that go all the way down to the genetic level, with the completion of various breakthroughs such as the Human Genome Project and the Human Microbiome Project. At the same time, extensive global studies were launched to come up with universal growth reference standards, as well as to set guidelines and indicators for infant and young child feeding. With this, the focus on the environment became evident as well, with discussions on climate change and food sustainability becoming more and more urgent.
Early in 2000, WHO embarked on a large-scale, multi-country, multi-continent study on growth standards using the exclusively breastfed infants as the reference. The WHO Growth Reference Standards became available in 2006 and had since served as the standard being used globally. This was a groundbreaking event, as for the first time, growth of exclusively breastfed children became the benchmark universally, further advancing the cause of promoting, protecting, and supporting breastfeeding. Further to this, after years of research in low and middle income countries, the experts convened by WHO presented results that led to the guidelines on the following: infant and young child feeding in 2003, the initiation and maintenance of breastfeeding and complementary feeding, and the universal recommendation for feeding non-breastfed children 6 to 24 months of age. In the same timeline, at the beginning of 2000 as well, great strides were being made regarding the influence of genetics on health and disease. The Human Genome Project ended in 2003 after 13 years of unlocking the 92% of genetic code of humans, but it is only after 20 years, just recently, now in 2022, when the entire genetic code was finally elucidated. The Human Microbiome Project of the US NIH followed in 2010, which was conducted in 2 phases and finally reaching completion in 2016. All of this opened a new horizon in pediatric nutrition, like the role of the microbiome in health and disease, the evolution of the microbiome in different life stages, the resurrection of probiotics, which had been consumed even as far back as the biblical times. These breakthroughs have now paved the way for what we know now as the omics era.
As we experience the many astounding breakthroughs in pediatric nutrition science throughout history, we've witnessed another astounding shift as well: the large-scale degradation of nature resulting in climate change, with an undeniable impact on food availability, food sustainability, and food safety, and consequently on health. More and more, we see how environmental degradation and climate change greatly affects our food supply and its severe consequences on the nutritional status of affected populations. What we've quickly come to know is how children are destined to be affected the most due to their vulnerabilities. In fact, WHO estimates that 88% of the existing burden of diseases that are attributable to climate change occurs in children under 5 years of age. Another 2021 study involving 19 countries also noted that climate change can heavily impact dietary diversity, which contributed to malnutrition more than the other traditionally considered factors. How do we address all of these? What role does sustainability play, especially from the perspective of pediatric nutrition? Let's find out.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Carvalho, and I am the Chief Medical Officer and Head of the Nestlé Product and Technology Centers for Nutrition. More importantly, I'm a pediatric gastroenterologist and a father of children who really cares about how we feed our future generations for the benefit of them and our world. Talking about sustainable nutrition in early childhood, it's good to know the key definitions that underlie what we mean when we say sustainable diets and sustainable healthy diets. Even though we talk about these terms as being relatively new, the definition of sustainable diets was coined back in 2010, over a decade ago, when the Food and Agricultural Organization, or the FAO of the United Nations, said that sustainable diets are those diets which have low environmental impact and which contribute to food and nutrition security and a healthy life for present and future generations. Sustainable diets are protective and respectful of biodiversity and the ecosystem. They are culturally acceptable. They are accessible to all. They are economically fair and affordable. They are nutritionally adequate, safe, and healthy while optimizing nature and human health. And while this definition is very broad and encompassing, it was the FAO of the United Nations that looked at this definition with a slightly important focus on health, as they recoined in 2019 the term sustainable healthy diets, which very simply put means dietary patterns that promote all dimensions of individuals' health and well-being. They have a low environmental pressure and impact. They are accessible, affordable, safe, and equitable, and they are culturally acceptable for all. And when we talk about sustainable diets and sustainable nutrition, we realize that it's not just one individual. It's not just healthcare professionals or pediatricians. It's not just food and dietitians. It's not government. It's not only individual stakeholders, but it takes a whole system to come together to further the future of our children and our planet. And that's what's referred to as sustainable nutrition food systems, which bring together the circle of health, social, economic, and ecological. These are the principles or the pillars on which sustainable nutrition food systems are built on. And the two principles that they follow are: one is a predilection for vegetables or plant-based diets, not to say that it's only plant-based, but it should be predominantly consisting of fruits, vegetables, legumes, because these things contribute to good health and have a low environmental impact, but allow for other parts of the diets like meats and dairy to be part of it as we look at the overall health of children and the planet. What's also important is the regionality and the seasonality has to be respected in these diets, such that they have a reduced environmental impact from the production chain. So what composes a good diet, which is okay for the planet and good for your health? And that's the planetary health diet. The Eat Lancet Commission back in 2019 proposed this global planetary health diet that is healthy for both people and the planet, abbreviated as PHD, or the Planetary Health Diet. Approximately half of the planetary health diet plate would be covered with vegetables and fruits of different colors, because we know, as we often tell our patients and the children, that a rainbow on the plate of different fruits and vegetables allows for good nutrient and variable micronutrient intake. A third of the plate is made up of whole grains, followed by plant-based proteins like beans and pulses, some unsaturated oils, with optional but modest amounts of animal protein and dairy, and some added sugars and starches as well. However, when we look at the world today, across different regions, North America, South Asia, the Southeast Asian region, parts of Africa, we see some things which tell us that we need to change for the benefit of our children and the benefit of our planet. Based on the evidence for health outcomes, the reference diet has been described as flexitarian because it is mainly plant-based, emphasizing whole grains, fruits, vegetables, nuts, soy, and other legumes, but is also included with optional intakes of animal sources in modest quantities. When we look over here, we see that across the world, there is a higher consumption of meats and not enough consumption of whole grains, vegetables, and fruits, showing that a change is necessary, and it takes all of us as healthcare professionals to educate ourselves and the patients we care for to change in the way that our children and the world deserves. So when it comes to feeding children, it is absolutely well known and well understood that breastfeeding is the best way to feed a baby. But it's also important to know that breastfeeding does contribute to a sustainable future for people and the planet. as exemplified by the SDG goals, which are met by multiple of them. And finally, when it comes to the advice we learn from and give each other, plant-based diets are good for personal health, population health, and planetary health. And it is this combination that we all need to understand better and learn from, such that we can give the best anticipatory guidance to parents and other healthcare professionals to actually advance the health of children and our planet.
As we've seen across the decades, there truly is no stopping the many amazing discoveries that we will find through careful study, curiosity, and compassion for children and the world we live in. What are the new frontiers we now face in pediatric nutrition? Where do we go from here? What does the future hold for pediatric nutrition research? Let's look at 10 important research priorities that will carry on in the years to come.
Let's take a look at what lies ahead for pediatric nutrition science with the 10 important research priorities in the years to come. Number 1. Genetics will continue to be a dominant force with the omics research, helping to untangle how specific nutrients interact with genes, proteins, metabolites to predict health. Number 2. Imprinting and epigenetics will predict how exposures to dietary components during critical periods of development program long-term health and contribute to disease. Number 3. Research on the microbiome will persist as we decipher its important role in health and towards mapping age-appropriate microbiome, as well as how nutrition intervention can move children to normal trajectories. Number 4. Biological networks will show how an individual genotype or phenotype can impact our metabolic response to diet, leading to what is termed as personalized nutrition. Number 5. The future is bright for gene-food interaction. Research will continue to focus on the relationship of diet and its components on normal growth and development, with the continued discovery of different bioactive components. The role of maternal diet before and during pregnancy and its effects on early nutritional events in the child will remain important. Number 6. Research on supporting the nutritional needs of special groups of children will continue, such as those with chronic illnesses or the premature babies. Number 7. The concept of why children eat and what drives parents to offer them particular food choices is a good starting point to determine nutrition-related behaviors. In addition, the role of the brain in relation to food choices and desire is another good area of research. Number 8. Population-based studies on the food system, food supply, and food environment in general will examine novel foods and food ingredients, long-term effects of new food technologies, focusing on agricultural processes, livestock breeding, crop breeding and food processing, and climate change on children should continue to be explored. Number 9. Studies in the last few years have also shifted to dietary patterns rather than specific nutrients and their effects on long-term health and disease. And finally, number 10. A paradigm shift is needed regarding nutrition research in general and pediatric nutrition in particular. Well-designed, large-scale prospective observational studies can also be reliable research designs, aside from randomized controlled trials. In addition, multiple surrogate endpoints can be designed instead of relying on just one laboratory examination or biomarker.
Meanwhile, with regards to human milk research, what does the future look like? From our first discussion in the early decades of pediatric nutrition and tracing all of the milestones from there, where is the science taking us?
Hello, I'm Hanne Teetgat and I'm a scientist researching human milk bioactives and how they affect child health. We know that human milk contains all ingredients to support early child development. It contains all nutritive components, like, for instance, lactose, protein, and fat, to help the child to grow and develop. But it also contains a myriad of bioactive components. These bioactive components come in many flavors, like, for instance, human milk oligosaccharides, antigens, etc., etc. These components are there to really help the child to develop its microbiota, its immune system, and so on. In our research, we want to understand how these components, these bioactives, steer child development and health. We want to understand how HMOs are working, what their function is, what they are doing, how they are working together with each other and with other bioactives. We want to see this in the context of early life. We want to understand how all these components are working together to give an infant the best possible start in life and the best possible outcome in later life.
As it always has been, so shall it always will be. The history of pediatric nutrition will continue to unfold in the future as more and more new researches are made and new pieces of information are learned. As technology and science advances and unlocks more and more about the individual, our community, and our environment, so too our enthusiasm for knowledge in nutrition will not waver. We live in exciting times, and as scientists and healthcare practitioners, it is a privilege for us to get to know more about food and nutrition in order to care for children all over the globe.
From retracing the history of pediatric nutrition, the road we must take is already laid out before us, and the call is loud and clear. That together, we can redefine the future with the latest in the science of pediatric nutrition. Together, let's discover more and more intersections, crossroads, links, and interactions of food, nutrition, the individual, the community, and the environment. This has been Dr. Freddy Gomez, your host for Day 1 of Nestlé Nutrition Institute's 97th Global Workshop, Intersections of Nutrition, Retracing Yesterday, Redefining Tomorrow.
Thank you everyone for joining us on the first day of our 97th NNI Global Workshop, Intersections of Nutrition, Retracing Yesterday, Redefining Tomorrow. We hope today's program was enriching for you and your practice as we seek to deepen our knowledge for the benefit of our patients and their future. For tomorrow, please tune in as we feature 8 fantastic speakers to talk more about what's new in research and what are the future directions in pediatric nutrition. We hope to see you there.